Was I wrong for calling out my friend's food choice? I live with a close friend who I truly care about, and we have shared a home for several years now. We are both around 30, and over time we have built a really strong bond. She has a serious digestive issue where even a small amount of dairy causes intense pain. It is not mild discomfort either. It can completely ruin her day. She also avoids meat but can eat eggs and some fish, so when I cook at home, it is easy for me to plan meals that work for both of us. The problem has always been when we eat out. I tend to know a bit more about ingredients and how food is made, so I sometimes notice things she might miss. Early on, I pointed something out to her several once, and afterwards she told me she did not like being corrected or having me speak up about her diet in front of others. I respected that and kept quiet from then on. But over the years, there have been multiple times when she ordered something that ended up making her sick, and it has affected more than just her. On a few trips, we have had to cut things short because she was in too much pain to continue. It is frustrating, but I have tried to stay supportive. Last weekend was different. We had planned a big overnight kayaking trip with a group of 4. It involved waking up in the middle of the night, driving for hours, taking a long ferry ride, and carefully timing everything so we could paddle safely in the morning. We had even reserved both campsites on a small island so we could have the entire place to ourselves. It took a lot of coordination, money, and time off work to make it happen. Right before heading out, we stopped for a meal. She ordered something with a type of bread that I knew usually contains a lot of butter. In that moment, I spoke up and told her it likely had dairy in it. She immediately looked upset, but when she checked, it turned out I was right, and she changed her order. Even though it helped her avoid getting sick, she was still annoyed with me for speaking up in front of the server. She reminded me that she had asked me not to do that. I understand why she feels that way, but given everything that went into this trip, I could not ignore something that could have caused her to become ill and potentially ruin the entire experience for everyone. Now I feel torn. I want to respect her independence and boundaries, but I also feel like there are moments where staying silent has real consequences for all of us. I cannot tell if I crossed the line by stepping in again, or if the situation justified it this time. Was I wrong for drinking more beers than the limit at a party? I am a man in my early 30s currently in a graduate program where most of my classmates are a bit younger than me. Recently, one of them hosted a party and invited everyone to bring a 6-pack of beer so people could mix and match and try different options. My partner came along with me, although he planned not to drink since he had work to do the next morning. Since we were coming together, we brought 2 6-packs between us. They were nothing fancy, just a couple of different ales we thought people might enjoy. When we arrived, everyone placed their drinks on a shared table, and throughout the night people would walk over, grab something, and continue socializing. It felt relaxed and casual, exactly what you would expect from that kind of gathering. As the evening went on, I ended up having 8 beers. My partner did not have any, so from my perspective, we had contributed more than we used. I did not think much of it at the time since the whole setup seemed communal and flexible. Toward the end of the night, though, the host approached me and said I had gone over the limit. He explained that each person was only supposed to have 6 drinks, regardless of how much they brought. I was surprised because that had not been clearly emphasized, and it did not seem to match how things were actually playing out. I pointed out that between the 2 of us, we had brought 12 beers and only consumed 8, so it did not feel like we had taken more than our share. He disagreed and said that my reasoning did not matter, insisting that I had personally gone over the limit. He even asked me to pay for the extra drinks I had. That caught me completely off guard and made the situation feel unnecessarily tense over something that seemed minor. Now I am left wondering if I misunderstood the expectations or if the whole situation was blown out of proportion. I did not intend to take advantage of anyone, but I also feel like the reaction did not match what actually happened. Am I wrong for setting limits after covering for a friend's cancellations? I am 28 and for a while now I have been the one in my friend group who organises outings. That usually means I handle booking tickets in advance and then everyone pays me back afterward. It has worked fine most of the time, but there has been an ongoing issue with one friend, who is 24 and deals with a medical condition that can make them cancel plans at the last minute. When that happens, their partner also stays behind to care for them. I understand that their situation is not something they can control, and I have tried to be flexible about it. The problem is that when they cancel after tickets have already been purchased, I end up covering the cost for both of them. This has happened more than once, and until recently I just absorbed the loss because I wanted to keep things easy and inclusive for everyone. But my situation has changed. I recently lost my job, and I can no longer afford to keep covering those costs. After thinking it through, I spoke to my friend and explained that moving forward, if I am booking something in advance, I either need them to still pay for their share even if they cannot attend, or they should sit out those specific events. I also made it clear that they are still welcome at any gatherings that do not require upfront payment or reservations. They did not take it well. They told me I was excluding them because of their condition and that it was unfair to expect them to pay for something they might not be able to attend. From their perspective, it feels like they are being pushed out of activities they enjoy because of something beyond their control. Now the group is split. Some people think I am being unreasonable and that we should all just pitch in a little extra when needed so no one feels left out. Others think I have already done more than enough and that it is fair for me to set a boundary now that my financial situation has changed. I feel torn. I do not want to exclude anyone, especially over something they cannot help, but I also do not think it is fair for me to keep taking on a cost I cannot afford anymore. I am trying to figure out if I handled this poorly or if this is simply a necessary boundary I should have set earlier. Was I wrong to hold back a co-worker's fundraiser after doubts? I am a 26-year-old woman working in a small office where people tend to support each other when someone is going through a difficult time. Recently, one of my co-workers shared that she was dealing with a sudden medical situation and was struggling financially. She said she might not be able to cover her rent, and naturally, a few of us wanted to help. I ended up organizing a small fundraiser. I reached out to everyone, collected contributions, and even added some of my own money. Altogether, it turned into a meaningful amount that could genuinely make a difference for her that month. The plan was simple: gather the money and give it to her directly. Before handing it over, I checked in with her to see how she would prefer to receive it. Instead of answering right away, she hesitated and said she would get back to me. That caught me off guard, but I did not think too much of it at first. The next day, another co-worker approached me privately and mentioned that the same person had been talking about planning a trip out of town around the same time she had said she could not afford rent. That information made me uneasy. I did not want to assume the worst or rely on office gossip, so I tried to gently ask her again about her situation. Her responses felt unclear and did not quite match what she had told us earlier. At that point, I started to feel uncomfortable handing over the money without understanding what was really going on. I did not accuse her of lying, but I decided to pause and hold on to the funds while I figured things out. I also let the people who contributed know that I wanted to clarify the situation before giving it to her. She was upset when she found out. She said I had embarrassed her and made it seem like I did not trust her. Some co-workers agree with her and feel that once the money was collected for her, it should have been given without question. Others think it was reasonable to be cautious, especially since the situation did not fully add up. Right now, the money is still set aside, untouched. I am trying to figure out the right way to handle this without creating more tension at work or mishandling something that other people trusted me to coordinate. I feel stuck between wanting to do the right thing for her and wanting to respect the intentions of everyone who contributed. Was I wrong for leaving after my friend marked a traumatic moment? A few years ago, something happened that still stays with me in a way I cannot fully shake. My wife and I were hiking in a remote mountain area, and during the climb she slipped and fell in a dangerous spot. It all happened so fast, and in that moment I truly believed I might lose her. She ended up stuck in a terrifying position, and I could not get to her or pull her up on my own. I remember the look on her face, the fear, and the helplessness I felt. Eventually, another hiker came along and helped get her to safety, but it took hours, and those hours felt endless. Even though she has never blamed me, I have never fully let go of that feeling. It is something that weighs on me more than I like to admit. Not being able to help her in that moment has stayed with me ever since. Recently, we were out at a brewery with a small group of friends. The atmosphere was relaxed and the conversation turned to hiking plans. One of the guys started talking about an upcoming trip, and since I had experience in that area, I offered a bit of advice. Out of nowhere, he turned to me and made a comment suggesting that I had left my wife behind during the incident. It completely caught me off guard. My wife immediately corrected him, but he just laughed like it was some kind of joke. I felt stunned and honestly hurt. I did not know how to respond in the moment, so I stepped away under the excuse of getting another drink, but instead I went outside to get some air. My wife followed me shortly after and could tell something was wrong. I told her I was not okay and that I wanted to leave. She agreed and we left together. The problem is that we had driven one of those friends there, including the one who made the comment, and I did not say anything before leaving. Later, he started messaging me, asking where I had gone and why I had left him there. Since he did not have a ride, he ended up paying for a trip home. When I confronted him about what he said and why he would bring up something so personal and painful, he responded by making light of it again, sending mocking messages and saying that I needed to toughen up. That response only made things worse. Now I feel conflicted. On one hand, I know I left someone stranded when I had agreed to give them a ride, which is not something I would normally do. On the other hand, I feel like what he said crossed a serious line, especially given how much the experience affected me. I keep wondering if I should have handled it differently in the moment, maybe said something before leaving, or if walking away was the only way to deal with it. Was I wrong for refusing my wife's spaghetti after finding out the secret? Last night, my wife made spaghetti for dinner. At first, everything seemed completely normal. The kitchen smelled great, and I was actually looking forward to it. She mentioned that she had tried something new with the recipe but asked me to just eat it before asking any questions. I did not think much of that at the time, so I sat down and started eating. After a few bites, I noticed something was a little different. It was not bad, just slightly off. The flavour was a bit sweet and had an odd texture that I could not quite place. It was not enough to stop me right away, but it definitely made me curious. So I asked her what she had changed. That is when she told me. She said she had taken leftover spaghetti from almost a week earlier, blended it, and mixed it into the sauce to make it thicker. The moment I heard that, my appetite disappeared. Even though I understood that it was technically the same ingredients, the idea of eating blended pasta that old made me feel uneasy. I immediately stopped eating. She did not take that well. She pointed out that I had already eaten a good portion of it and said that clearly I had no issue with it until I knew what was in it. From her perspective, I was suddenly overreacting. But for me, that was exactly the issue. I had eaten it without knowing, and if I had known beforehand, I would have made a different choice. I tried to explain that it was not about insulting her cooking, but about being uncomfortable with what I was eating. She saw it differently. She felt like I was rejecting her effort and acting as if she had served something unacceptable. The situation escalated, and in the end, I made myself something simple to eat instead because I could not bring myself to finish the meal. The rest of the evening was tense. She barely spoke to me, and later I found out she told her family about it. Some of them think I embarrassed her and should have just eaten it without making an issue. On the other hand, people in my own family agree that it was not something I should have been surprised with. Now I feel stuck between feeling guilty for hurting her feelings and feeling like I had a right to know what I was being served. I cannot tell if I handled it poorly or if it is reasonable to expect some honesty about what goes into a meal, especially when it might make someone uncomfortable. Was I wrong for saying I'd never name our child after my wife's sister? My wife and I are expecting a daughter soon, and like most couples, we have been talking a lot about names. We have always agreed on a simple rule: both of us have to say yes for a name to be chosen. If one of us is not comfortable, it is off the table. That has worked well so far. My wife has a younger sister who is in her early 20s, and I have struggled to get along with her for years. In my view, she is very used to getting her way and does not handle disappointment well. Her family tends to step in and comfort her whenever something does not go the way she wants, which only seems to reinforce their behavior. I have tried to stay polite, but it has always been difficult for me to connect with her. There have been moments that really stuck with me. At our wedding, for example, she became very upset shortly before the ceremony because her shoes were not the exact shade she expected. It turned into a whole situation where everyone had to stop and comfort her, even though it was something that barely mattered in the grand scheme of the day. Moments like that have shaped how I see her. Recently, we were having dinner with my wife's family when her sister casually mentioned that it would be nice if we named our daughter after her. I did not take it seriously at the time and just moved on. Later, when we got home, my wife told me she actually liked the idea and wanted to consider it. I told her honestly that I was not comfortable with that. Given our rule, that should have been the end of it. My wife let her family know that we would not be using that name, and that is when things escalated. Messages started coming in, first to her and then to me, asking us to reconsider. It quickly turned into pressure, with repeated questions about why we would not agree. Eventually, I received calls directly from both her mother and her sister, and they kept pushing the issue. After being asked over and over again, I lost my patience. I told them clearly that I would not name my daughter after her sister and that I did not want my child associated with behavior I find immature. I also pointed out that this whole situation felt like an example of exactly what I was talking about. Then I ended the call. Since then, things have been tense. My wife understands why I was frustrated and agrees that her family pushed too far, but she also thinks I should apologize for how I said it. Her family, on the other hand, is very upset with me, and I have been told that her sister has been crying since the conversation. Now I feel stuck. I do not regret standing firm on the name, but I am questioning whether I went too far in how I expressed it. At the same time, I feel like the pressure from her family crossed the line, and I am not sure why I am the only one expected to smooth things over. Was I wrong for snatching things back to prove a point? I work in an office where most people get along pretty well, but there is one ongoing issue that drives me absolutely crazy. One of my coworkers, a man in his late 50s, has this habit of just taking things straight out of people's hands without asking. It is not just once in a while either. It is constant. He will grab papers, snacks, pens, anything that happens to be within reach, and he does it so casually that it is like he does not even realize how intrusive it is. To be fair, I do not think he is trying to be rude or mean. He is known for being a bit absent-minded, and people joke about it. Most of the office just shrugs it off and deals with it, but for me, it really gets under my skin. I cannot stand having something taken out of my hands without warning. It feels invasive, and it puts me on edge every time it happens. What makes it more frustrating is that I have talked to him about it more than once. I have tried to explain it in a calm and reasonable way, even given examples so he could understand the difference between being offered something and just taking it. Every time, he apologizes and says he gets it, and for sure, while it seems like he is making an effort. Then, without fail, he slips right back into the same behavior. There have been small moments where I could let it go, like when he grabs a handful of shelf snacks in the break room. But then there are moments that feel much more disruptive. Recently, I was filling out an important form, and he literally pulled the pen out of my fingers because he suddenly needed it. It ruined what I was working on and forced me to start over. That was the moment I decided I had had enough. I figured that maybe the only way he would understand how frustrating it is would be to experience it himself. So I made a plan that the next time he grabbed something from me without asking, I would take it right back and remind him to ask first. The opportunity came sooner than expected. I was in the break room with a bag of chips when he walked in and immediately took it from me like he always does. Without thinking twice, I took the bag back from him and told him again that he needed to ask first. Then I offered it to him properly. Instead of taking the hint, he reacted badly. He grabbed the bag in a huff, and in the process, it tore open and spilled everywhere. We both had to clean it up, and he was clearly annoyed. He told me that I made him feel like a child. Now I am wondering if I handled it the wrong way. I was trying to set a boundary and get through to him after multiple conversations that went nowhere, but I also see how my reaction might have come across as petty or immature. I am stuck between feeling justified and standing up for myself and questioning whether I escalated things unnecessarily. Was I wrong for taking my grandparents' money after what they said? I am an 18-year-old woman, and for most of my life, my grandparents were not part of it. I never really understood why when I was younger. All I knew was that there had been a serious falling out in my family when I was a child, and contact between my mother and my grandparents completely stopped. Recently, my grandparents reached out and asked to meet me. I agreed, mostly out of curiosity. During that meeting, I finally learned what had happened years ago. When I was around 8, my parents were separating, and I was told they were getting a divorce. Not long after, my father passed away in a car accident. According to my grandparents, they saw me at the funeral, and that is where everything escalated. Because my parents were still legally married at the time, my mother inherited everything. During a heated argument, my grandparents said some very harsh things to her, including calling her degrading names. After that, my mother cut them off completely and did not allow them to see me again. When I spoke to my mother about it, she confirmed the general situation, though it is clear that her experience of it is very emotional and painful. From her point of view, they were cruel and disrespectful during one of the worst moments of her life. During my visit, my grandparents told me they had set aside a large amount of money for me, something they intended as a fund for my future. It is a significant sum, enough to cover education or help me get started in life. I accepted it and have stayed in contact with them since. When my mother found out, she was extremely upset. She feels that by reconnecting with them and accepting the money, I have taken their side and dismissed what they said and did to her. During our argument, she brought up again how they had insulted her back then. In the heat of the moment, I said something harsh back to her, implying that their words were justified. That comment made everything worse. Now things between us are tense. My sister thinks I should apologize, especially for what I said, because it deeply hurt our mother. At the same time, I feel like I am allowed to make my own choices about my relationship with my grandparents and my future, especially when it comes to something as important as financial support. I cannot tell if I crossed a line by accepting their help and speaking the way I did, or if I am justified in making my own decisions even if it upsets my mother. Was I wrong to stop my mom from babysitting over a $7 class? I am a mother to a 16-month-old girl, and I recently returned to work part-time. To make things easier, my mother had been watching my daughter a couple of days each week. It felt like a good arrangement at first, especially since I trusted her and wanted them to spend time together. Around the same time, I enrolled my daughter in a toddler program at our local community centre. It is a simple, low-cost class that includes playtime, songs, and small activities. The children get to explore different stations, interact with others, and try things like art and sensory play. It can be messy, but I see it as a great way for her to learn and grow. She has already started recognizing colors, playing more independently, and showing interest in other children. My mother, however, never liked the class. She described it as overwhelming and unnecessary, and felt that quieter activities like walks or library visits were better. Even though she disagreed, she told me she would still take my daughter as I asked. I trusted her to follow through. After a while, I started to notice something was off. My daughter had not brought home any of the little projects they usually make, and it had been weeks since I saw any sign that she had been attending. When I looked into it, I realized my mother had stopped taking her altogether without telling me. That was what upset me the most. It was not just about the class itself, but the fact that she chose to ignore something I felt strongly about and then kept it from me. It made me question whether I could rely on her to follow my decisions as a parent. Because of that, I decided to find someone else to watch my daughter while I work. I hired a student who was willing to take her to the class and follow the routine I set. My mother was deeply hurt by this decision. She says I am pushing her out and choosing a stranger over family, especially when her intention was to help and keep my daughter close to someone she knows. Now our relationship feels strained, and I am left wondering if I went too far. Part of me feels justified because I need to trust the person caring for my child. But another part of me wonders if I'd overreacted and caused a bigger issue than necessary over something that, on the surface, seems small. Am I wrong for refusing to give up my home office? I am a 27-year-old woman living in a rented house with 2 roommates, one a year younger than me and the other a bit older. The place is larger than what we really need, with extra bedrooms and a finished lower level, and we were lucky to get it at a good price. Because of that, we have each been able to set things up in a way that fits our lifestyles. I work entirely from home, and one of my roommates splits her time between home and the office. Early on, we agreed to turn 2 of the extra bedrooms into workspaces. Our other roommate was not happy about that and felt it was unfair unless we paid a high share of the rent. To keep things smooth, we agreed to pay more. At the time, I made it clear that if I was paying extra, my office would be a private space that others could not use. My other roommate was more flexible and did not mind if her room doubled as a guest space. The third roommate pushed back, especially about what would happen if she needed space for guests, but eventually she agreed, and the issue seemed settled. For more than a year, everything worked fine. Recently, though, she mentioned that 2 friends of hers would be visiting from overseas and staying for a couple of weeks. At first, that was not a problem. We have all hosted guests before, and it has usually gone well. But then she added that her plan was for her friends to stay in both of our office rooms so they would not have to share a space. I reminded her of the agreement we made when we moved in, especially since I am paying more specifically to keep that room as my workspace. That is when things escalated. She became upset, called me selfish, and accused me of being overly controlling about the space. Beyond the agreement, there is also a practical issue. My work setup is not something I can easily move. I rely on multiple screens and a proper desk arrangement, and relocating everything into my bedroom for weeks would be difficult and disruptive. My other roommate is trying to keep the peace and suggested that I just make it work temporarily, even offering to help me move things around. This is the first real conflict we have had in an otherwise good living situation, which makes me question myself. I do not want to damage the dynamic in the house, but I also feel like I am being asked to give up something I specifically pay extra for. Now I am wondering if I am being too rigid, or if it is reasonable to stand firm on something we all agreed to from the beginning. Was I wrong for sending a blunt message after my friend took my clothes? I have been close with a friend, who I will call Emma, for about a decade. Over the past year and a half, she has helped my partner and me by staying at our apartment to look after our cat when we travel. We have always paid her for it and made sure she was comfortable, even encouraging her and her partner to treat our place like a home while they were there. I also gave her several bags of clothes to keep, things we had already discussed, so she knew she was welcome to take those specific items. After one of her recent stays, she casually mentioned that she had borrowed a pair of my lounge pants and needed to return them. I had no idea she had taken them, and although she could not have known, they were fairly new and meant something to me. When I later asked for those back, along with another item I remembered she had, she returned them but also brought a much larger bag filled with many more pieces of clothing. That is when I realized the situation was much bigger than I thought. The bag included items from different parts of my closet and drawers, things I had never offered or even noticed were missing at the time. Some were newer, some had sentimental value, and others were pieces I had assumed I had simply misplaced over the past year. It became clear that she had been taking things over multiple visits without telling me. She apologized and said I could let her know if I thought of anything else that might be missing. Over the next few weeks, I did exactly that, asking about specific items I remembered. She returned more things and eventually suggested that I come over and look through her closet myself to see if there was anything else of mine. That suggestion did not sit well with me. By that point, I had been trying to sort this out for weeks, and the idea of having to search through her belongings to recover my own felt wrong. It made me feel like the responsibility had somehow shifted onto me, even though I was not the one who had taken anything in the first place. So I sent her a message explaining how I felt. I told her that this situation was serious to me, that it felt like a breach of trust, and that I needed her to take responsibility for returning what she had taken. I also asked for space because I was genuinely shocked and hurt by what had happened. Since then, she has apologized again and returned even more items, bringing the total to around 25 pieces. Now that things have settled a bit, I keep wondering if I was too harsh in how I communicated. I do not regret speaking out, but I question whether my tone may have made things worse between us. At the same time, I cannot ignore how uncomfortable and violated I felt realizing how much had been taken without my knowledge. I am trying to figure out if being that direct was justified given the situation, or if I should have handled it in a softer way to preserve the friendship. Was I wrong to take back an expensive wedding gift? My partner and I had been planning a big trip to Europe for a long time, and by late 2025 we had everything booked and locked in. Flights, hotels, activities, all of it was carefully arranged months in advance so we could get good prices and avoid any last-minute stress. It was something we were really looking forward to. Around the same time, my partner's sister announced that her wedding would take place the following fall. We were excited for her, and in the moment, we may well felt like a generous and thoughtful offer. We told her and her fiancé that as an early wedding gift, we would cover the cost for them to join us on our trip. That meant flights, accommodations, and activities, essentially the whole experience. We thought it would be a meaningful way to celebrate with them. She turned the offer down at the time. She said it would feel a bit uncomfortable joining our trip and that she would rather save her time off for a different vacation she had in mind. We respected that decision and moved on, assuming that was the end of it. Then, just recently, with less than 2 weeks before our departure, she reached out and said she had changed her mind and wanted to take us up on the offer after all. That completely caught us off guard. By that point, everything had already been booked for months, and prices had changed dramatically. When I looked into it, the cost to add 2 more people at the last minute was thousands more than it would have been earlier. That is where things became difficult. While we are financially comfortable, the idea of spending that much extra money for something that could have been handled earlier did not sit right with me. It felt unreasonable to absorb such a large increase simply because the decision had been delayed. After thinking it through, I told my partner that I did not feel comfortable honoring the original offer under these new circumstances. I decided to be the one to communicate that to her. I explained that we were no longer able to cover the trip due to how much the cost had risen so close to the departure date. As expected, the reaction was not great. It created tension within the family, and now things feel awkward whenever the topic comes up. Some people understand where I am coming from, while others feel that an offer is an offer, especially when it was tied to something as important as a wedding. Now I am left questioning whether I handled this fairly. On one hand, the situation has changed in a significant way since the original offer was made. On the other hand, I did make the offer freely, and I can see why taking it back might feel disappointing or even hurtful. I cannot tell if I set a reasonable boundary or if I should have followed through no matter the cost. Was it disrespectful to eat in a cemetery? Earlier today, I had a medical appointment where I was specifically instructed not to eat or drink anything beforehand. By the time it was over, I felt drained, shaky, and extremely hungry. It had been hours since I last had anything, and I could feel it catching up with me. I knew I needed to sit down and eat fairly quickly, so I stopped at a nearby grocery store and picked up something simple, a croissant and a bottle of cola. The problem was finding somewhere to actually sit and eat. The area around the store was crowded and loud, with traffic rushing by and not many places to rest. I did not feel great and just wanted a quiet spot where I could sit for a few minutes without all the noise and movement around me. The closest place that seemed calm and peaceful was a cemetery just a short walk away. I went inside, walked a bit until I found a bench, and sat down. I was not near anyone, and there did not seem to be any kind of service or gathering happening nearby. The atmosphere was quiet, and honestly, it felt like the only place where I could properly relax for a moment. I quietly ate my food and drank my cola, trying to recover from how I was feeling. I was not making any noise, leaving any mess, or interacting with anything around me. I was just sitting there, minding my own business. As I was finishing up, an older woman, probably in her 70s, walked past me. She paused and asked who I was there visiting. I answered honestly and told her I was not visiting anyone, just sitting somewhere quiet to eat. She looked surprised, almost taken aback, and then told me that I should be ashamed of myself for being disrespectful. After that, she walked away without saying anything else. That moment stayed with me. I sat there for a bit longer, suddenly feeling out of place in a way I had not before. I finished what I had and left shortly after, but I could not stop thinking about what she said. On one hand, I understand that a cemetery is a meaningful and emotional place for many people. It is somewhere people go to grieve, remember loved ones, and feel a sense of connection. From that perspective, seeing someone there for a completely unrelated reason might come across as inappropriate or even insensitive, especially if someone is in the middle of mourning. On the other hand, I was not treating the space carelessly or disrespectfully. I was not being loud, disruptive, or leaving anything behind. I simply needed a quiet place to sit after feeling unwell, and that was the only option nearby that provided that kind of environment. In my mind, I was using the space in a calm and respectful way, not interfering with anyone else's experience. Now I keep going back and forth in my head. I can see how my presence might have felt wrong to someone who views that space very differently, especially if they were dealing with loss. At the same time, I do not feel like my actions were intentionally disrespectful or harmful. It feels more like a clash of expectations about what is appropriate in a place like that. I am left wondering if I unknowingly crossed a social boundary that I should have been more aware of, or if this was simply a situation where two people had very different views on how a quiet public space can be used.